Hello everybody, this is our project and we're going to talk about symbolic power and feminism, gender and discourse, and how those two subjects go together with their link to applied linguistics. First, we're going to explain what is symbolic power. According to Bourdieu's text called Language and Symbolic Power, it exists an interesting linguistic exchange between a producer with a linguistic capital and a consumer capable of producing a symbolic profit. This is also an economic exchange within a particular relation, which is called symbolic relation of power, which means the speaker is both a consumer and a producer at the same time. Linguistic practice communicates information about the manner of communicating, like expressive styles, which takes on social value and a symbolic efficacy. Within linguistic exchange, utterances are signs of wealth and authority, and they receive their value in their relation to a certain market, characterized by a law of price formation. This also depends on the linguistic competence of the speakers, that is to say, both their capacity for production and their capacity for appropriation and appreciation. The groups who speak those languages and the whole social structure are presented in this interaction within utterances. Another characteristic of utterances is their strategies of condescension feature, which means that language has hierarchy deriving profit from a symbolic relation of power. This symbolic relation of power can be subject to negotiation. It also can be manipulated. In other words, the more capital one possesses, manipulation gets greater. The linguistic production is affected by the anticipation of market sanctions. All verbal expressions are marked by their conditions of reception and owe some of their properties. One of the most important linguistic exchange features is their censorship. That is to say, it not only determines the manner of saying, but also what it is possible or not possible to say. There is an interdependence between the interlocutors and the expressive capacities, which can be seen clearly in French. For example, when it depends on the disparity in age or social status, the manner you treat someone. For example, the and tu. Nevertheless, when the speaker is confronted with a socially heterogeneous audience, it occurs something called a stylistic collision. We have learned to speak a language not only by hearing it, but also by speaking it within a particular position in the social space. In other words, linguistic competence is acquired in a social context and through practice. Then we have feminist linguistic theory, that is to say, language use with a feminist perspective. But what is feminism? Feminism is a range of political movements, ideologies, and social movements that share a common goal: to define, establish, and achieve political, economic, personal, and social equality of sexes. Feminist authors like Simone de Beauvoir and Nicole Claude Mathieu expose different approaches feminists could be taking into account, and one of them is linguistics. Feminist linguistics is a multidisciplinary enterprise for anthropology, sociolinguistics, and psychology, and aims at having a critical view of the arrangement between sexes. However, it is crucial to address something before start talking about gender issues, and that is sex and gender. The word sex tends to relate to biological differences. The differences between male and female sexes are anatomical and physiological. The word gender varies greatly between societies. Gender tends to denote the social and cultural role of each sex between a given society, rather than being purely assigned by genetics. People often develop their gender roles in response to their environment. Nicole Claude Mathieu suggested that there are three main paradigms for conceptualizing the gender-sex relationships. First is homology, which means learning feminine or masculine behavior depending on your biological sex. Second is analogy, that is basically gender symbolizes sex. It has to do with gender roles and the collective social experience. Third and last is heterogeneity. This means gender constructs sex, not the other way around. But what about sexism within language? It is known by many that within our discourse we portray unequal relationships between men and women. However, it is important to note that the sexism of many conventional usages was challenged by feminists early on. Usages were thought to be in need of reform if they were offensive or androcentric, implying that the norm of humanity is male. Reform usually meant avoiding offensive expressions and recasting androcentric ones so they become neutral. But what does feminists look for in linguistic terms? Actually, they look for two main things. The first one is avoiding androcentric concepts and replacing them with more neutral ones so no one is excluded from discourse. The second one is providing more feminine view through language and discourse in order to portray woman reality to the world. So, after explaining all the concepts about feminism and symbolic power, how do we find a relation between them? What is the link that joins them together? The thing is, symbolic power maintains its effect through the misrecognition of power relations situated in the social matrix of a given field. While symbolic power requires a dominator, it also requires the dominated to accept their position in the exchange of social value that occurs between them. And language is a way of portraying this inequality. Rights between men and women plus other sexual minorities are unequal, and not being aware of that takes us to an unconscious mode, based on a cultural social domination occurring within the everyday social habits, that we keep repeating and repeating, showing sexism in the way we speak, the way we communicate our ideas, the way we show ourselves to the rest of the world, and most important of all, the way we interact with other people. This problem can be observed in many languages. A clear example in Spanish is the word todos, that has the communicative intention to refer to a group of men and women, but generally refers to a group of male gender. On the other hand, over the past few decades, writers and instructors have become more aware of common terminology and writing styles that tend to favor men and assumptions about behavior that no longer reflect the modern world. However, religion affects enormously in the construction of our language. Religion greatly affects the use of language in a repressive way. Let's think about how Catholic religion portrayed an entire cosmovision to dominate the world in a certain way, by showing, for example, how the feminine essence is below the masculine one, and that shows an entire power hierarchy illustrated by the Church, explicitly and implicitly, and also present in our lives. And that is basically how related are symbolic language and feminism. Its different movements and theories have been concerned with language and sexist language use. Language is by far feminist focus. So how about if we, instead of saying policeman or mankind, we start saying police officer or humankind? So the big question now is, how do we as teachers or future teachers apply the aforementioned concepts in our classroom? Is it difficult? Is it possible? The answer is very simple. Of course we can apply this whole idea. The idea is taking advantage of the asymmetric relation between teacher and student in a positive way. Remember, our goal is to make our students feel curious about the power relations they have experienced so far and how that is portrayed in the way we talk every day. This promotes critical thinking and is a big step to start getting rid of the inequality of the sexes. In conclusion, this is about promoting questioning about feminism. In other words, the way we combine these two concepts relates to the idea of promoting respect between students. For instance, respecting their differences, their culture, their sexual orientation, their race, and so on. Tolerance is also important, as well as equality, as we have seen during this whole video. Finally, we want to address some issues about what we have talked so far. This is our critique. We divided this into 3 concepts, which are incongruity, living without power relations, and categorization. We will talk about them in a second, addressing them separately. However, these concepts have to do with the problems existing within the whole conclusion we have done around the idea of relating symbolic power to feminism. First, incongruity has to do with how applying the idea doesn't relate much with the goal of our video. Basically because we want to expose problems inside power relations by using another power relation, which is teacher and student. Okay, then we have a second critique, which is a question, and that is it possible to live in a world without power relation? The answer is very simple. No, actually, we can't even live without it. Well, animals, humans, and many other things within nature have power relations between them. There is no society or grouping without power. The social and the power imply each other. One cannot exist without the other. Finally, we have categorization. This has to do with the many concepts that exist within this matter, and how complicated it is for some people to learn those tags and apply them. However, tags are necessary when we want to develop a language, due to the fact that what is not named, it doesn't exist at all. So now that we're getting to the conclusion of this video, we want to conclude by saying thank you very much to the ones who watched it. I hope you liked it, and I hope it helped you to learn some new things.